It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. Mocking the faithful has become a team sport for the Trump administration. Let's start with Pete Hegseth, who at a recent Pentagon religious service delivered a prayer that he thought was drawn from the book of Ezekiel, but wasn't. It was a speech from Pulp Fiction, a scene in which Samuel L. Jackson recites a passage that sounds like it's from the Bible, but isn't, before executing someone. That is what Hegseth chose to invoke at a Pentagon prayer service as he presides over a war with a Muslim nation of 93 million people, wearing a crusader tattoo on his chest and the word infidel on his forearm. Then there's J.D. Vance, a convert to Catholicism, a faith that, by his own telling, he came to through serious intellectual and spiritual discernment, a faith with a 2,000-year tradition of moral theology and doctrinal rigor. At a recent Turning Point USA conference, J.D. Vance told the Pope to be careful when talking about theology.
There is more than a 1,000-year tradition of just war theory. Okay? Now, we can, of course, have disagreements about whether this or that conflict is just, but I think that it's important, in the same way that it's important for the Vice President of the United States to be careful when I talk about matters of public policy. I think it's very, very important for the Pope to be careful when he talks about matters of theology.
Pope Leo, by the way, was raised in the Augustinian tradition. That's the Catholic order that codified just war theory. For J.D. Vance to lecture the Pope on matters of theology, especially this one, someone needs to remind him that pride is a sin. You almost get the sense that J.D. Vance uses his faith as a prop when it's convenient and discards it the moment it becomes a burden. And then there's the president. Donald Trump posted this AI-generated image of himself as Jesus, then claimed he thought it was a doctor. This was on the heels of a profanity-laden Easter Sunday social media post that was designed to offend the entire Muslim faith. Donald Trump has shown repeatedly that his relationship to faith of any kind is purely transactional. He really does seem to believe that God's purpose is to serve Trump. Lincoln had a line about this. He said he didn't pray for God to be on his side. He prayed to be on God's side. Trump has inverted that completely, and Hegseth and Vance have followed him. I wanted to talk to someone who understands how deeply the Trump team's recent behavior has offended Christians, a group that is an essential part of his base. Reverend Paul Brandeis Raushenbush is an ordained minister, president of Interfaith Alliance, and one of the clearest theological voices in America on the relationship between faith, democracy, and power. Here's our conversation. Reverend Paul, welcome to the show. I think I want to work our way up today from Hegseth to Vance, and if we have time, all the way to Trump, because it seems like we have an entire team sport in the Trump administration of offending Christians of all stripes, of misappropriating the teachings of Jesus, of getting theology completely wrong, and of accidentally quoting Tarantino when you're thinking you're quoting the Bible. Let's go with Hegseth first. I mean, you could not. I was going to say it's straight out of Hollywood, but it is straight out of Hollywood, right? You wouldn't believe it if it was in a movie, and it was in a movie. In some ways, Hegseth is the most dangerous of the three because you get the sense that he actually has the zeal of the convert. I don't know how wedded Vance actually is to his Catholicism. You would think if he was serious about it, he wouldn't be lecturing the Pope. I don't think there's any doubt that Popes. I don't think there's
two popes.
All of them. Yeah, right. Same for Trump. Whenever he invokes the Bible or spirituality, period, you get the sense that it is blasphemous almost by definition. But let's start with Hegseth. He actually wears his zealotry on his skin in the form of a crusader tattoo. He has infidel tattooed on one of his forearm, which is a deeply offensive but tongue-in-cheek reference to his time in the Army. You know what? I'll just let you riff. What should we be thinking about when we see Pete Hegseth at the makeshift chapel in the Pentagon auditorium invoking scripture while we're at war with a Muslim nation of 93 million people and imploring God Almighty to not hear the lamentations of his enemies?
Well, let me start with a strange place, but it goes back to, I think it's 1796. There was something called the Treaty of Tripoli. Have you ever heard of that? It's not a common reference for people.
I mean, if this was the Barbary pirates and Jefferson,
what's important about just referencing it, and people can look it up on their own. Treaty of Tripoli. It was a treaty that was signed by every single member of Congress at the time, most of whom had been a part of writing of the Constitution and the creation of the country. And there is a line there that is so important for us to remember, because it says, as the United States is in no way founded on the Christian religion, it should have no enmity towards our Muslim neighbors. So that's a really important reference, because what Hegseth really wants to couch this in is a holy war. He wants to go back, and that, those enmities, those long-standing, those are not part of America's tradition, and they should not be entered into. Like, the military should not be mentioning those. The Secretary of Defense, it's outrageous the way he's talking about this work. And the framework here is that he is part of a church whose his pastor is someone who is a avowed Christian nationalist in the most fundamental sort of way, to the extent where his pastor has recommended revoking the 19th Amendment, giving women the right to vote. So he's in this extremely conservative, extremely dogmatic, extremely zealot. You use the term zealotry. This is so dangerous for our military, which is supposed to be actually sane, focused, very, very intentional about every word we say and every move we make. And so, sorry, that sounded like a song, but it is really like, this is important. And we don't need a zealot, but not only a zealot, but also like someone who is discriminatory towards other people in the military. I mean, you have a military background, I think, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so on Good Friday, they had a service, but they specifically said this is only for Protestants. No Catholics can come to the service that is sponsored by the Department of Defense. I mean, what does that mean? That a whole section of the military is not invited to the main service that the Department of Defense is putting out there. And this is so problematic. My father was in the military. There's all sorts of ways that this is an affront to Americans.
It's Ken with a quick break to tell you about Meidas Defense, our latest news lineup on the Meidas Plus Substack. We've got regular reports on the war with Iran and the broader geopolitical fallout, plus critical updates you're not going to see anywhere else. Every installment features expert guests and insightful commentary from people who've been in the arena. Navy SEALs, combat vets, senior intelligence analysts, and DC insiders like Scott McFarlane, MeidasTouch's chief Washington correspondent. Find us on the Meidas Plus and Ken Harbaugh Show Substack channels. Check out the links below. Thanks.
And we should understand it as very dangerous. It's clouding his mind. Faith is meant to actually focus our minds. In his case, it's clouding. The last thing I'll say is he called, you should really appreciate this. He called the press, the media, Pharisees. Yeah. You saw that, right?
Oh, for daring criticize.
Is completely skewed. Listen, I want you to have your own faith tradition. That is your right, as every American can have whatever faith tradition. You cannot use your position in government or military to impose that on everyone else. That is anti-American. And that's what's going on in the military right now. It's very, very dangerous. And especially this worldview that does see, this conflict as some sort of cosmological conflict. It's really problematic. And every American who understands the history of our country should understand that this is problematic.
I'd love your help unpacking his Pharisees analogy as a reverend, because I'm sure you heard the anti-Semitic dog whistle in that. I mean, that charge goes back 2,000 years. Right. I'm sure you also heard his escalation from thinking of himself, we're talking about Secretary Hegseth, as Christ's missionary on earth to carry war unto his enemies. to positioning himself as Christ personified. I mean, that was the analogy when he was talking about the Pharisees criticizing Jesus. And now the Pharisees are criticizing me. The Pharisees being those of us in the press who dare raise objections to how he's carrying out this war against Iran. I mean, I don't know how much more offensive the Trump administration can get. This is of a piece, literally, of Trump sending out an AI image of himself as Jesus. Now Hegseth is comparing himself to Jesus being persecuted by the Pharisees being his critics in the press.
Well, it is very of a piece with this administration from the beginning. I think that it's helpful, actually, to think back the first day of the inauguration when you had a bishop in her own pulpit asking for mercy for immigrants and LGBTQ. You can disagree with that. That's fine. We do that all the time. The way the bishop was attacked, Bishop Marion Buddy, was attacked for saying something from her old pulpit, from these people who say we're the religious freedom people. It shows that was the first day. And from then on, if you were not in political lockstep with this administration, you were an enemy. And if that was coming out of your faith tradition, all the worse for you. Because not only would they come after your political position, they would say your religious position is untenable. And so that's where this feud with the Catholic Church started. It started the month after this administration took power, where J.D. Vance basically said, with in these exact terms, that the Catholic Church was padding the bottom line on its work with immigrants, not at all acknowledging that it's deeply rooted in Catholic theology and the way they've acted in this country from the beginning, especially as an immigrant community themselves, and having many immigrants in their congregations. And so I think that we can understand this not as this weird last couple of weeks, but actually the way they've operated since the beginning of this administration.
Well, let's go to J.D. Vance because we're gonna keep ramping up to Trump himself. But you have in J.D. Vance a recent convert who has the, I don't know what you would call it, the chutzpah to take on the Pope.
That's a very nice
the Pope for his theological shortcomings. And look, JD was a year after me at Yale Law School, and if there is anyone in the history of American politics who has more of a know-it-all affect, I can't think of one, but it doesn't get much more know-it-all than lecturing the Pope as a recent convert to Catholicism. Yeah,
I mean, it's really bad. And then, but again, this goes back. Is there an American politician who can claim that he was specifically rebuked by two popes for his theology? First Pope Francis had to do it, a specific letter about what J.D. Vance was saying and why it was not the Catholic position. And now Pope Leo, and let's not forget, what Pope Leo was saying was about war and how war should be used. J.D. Vance lectured the Pope on something called just war theory, which is a Catholic contribution to when you should go to war. It's a very systematic thing. It comes out of an Augustinian tradition, of which Pope Leo was the head of the Augustinian tradition in the world. And you have J.D. Vance lecturing him, saying, stay out of politics. This is very rich, coming from a party, I have to say, which has at times said, these politicians, they have very much felt like the Catholic Church was on their side on some of their issues and very welcomed that support. Now that they are being criticized, they're singing the exact opposite tune. And this feels like an unforced error. I think that, Pope Leo could say these things. They could say, okay, we understand that point of view. We're trying to do this. We believe this is under just war. But the way that J.D. Vance has done this is lecturing the Pope. The Pope should stay out of theology. Almost that bad. So
he should be careful. The Pope should be careful when he lectures on matters of theology.
Careful. You don't think he's careful? I think that, and he has a book coming out, by the way, in like a couple months about
with a Protestant church on the cover.
Incidentally, they danced very fast on that. But I think that this is. It's so interesting. And then you had Sean Hannity, I think, saying he's leaving the Catholic Church because of
yes, he did.
The Pope. And so I actually think this is like a momentous moment for the Catholic Church in America where, I think they've been somewhat in the middle, slightly conservative, especially white Catholics. But now I think that there is like the Catholic Church is like, we don't like being badgered, and the Catholic hierarchy does not like being badgered. And J.D. Vance as the supposed front runner for 2028, I think he's going to have problems with it.
That was an excerpt of my interview with Reverend Paul Raushenbush. For the full interview, check out my Substack. The link is below. Thanks.
Love this video? Support independent media and unlock exclusive content, ad-free videos, and custom emojis by becoming a paid member of our YouTube channel today. You can also gift memberships to others. Let's keep growing together.